What is going on, guys? My name is Sena and welcome back to another video. It's now been over 7 months since the last time I made a settings video. It's a new year and I think it's about time I brought you guys a new updated settings guide to make sure that you are running the best settings for performance and gameplay. If I had to start fresh on a new account, these are the settings that I would use. In this video, I'm going to be going through the entire settings menu and telling you what I use so you can follow along and optimize your game along with me. Right before we jump into the video though, guys, I want to take a moment to introduce you and thank Valorant Tracker for sponsoring this video. Valorant Tracker is the most popular app for viewing and tracking your stats and improvement. You can look at all sorts of stats like KD ratios, win rates, agent win rates, map win rates, and so much more. One of the coolest features Valorant Tracker offers is the live match tab, where you could actually see the stats and ranks of every player in your game. Did I also mention that Valorant Tracker is 100% free to download and use, and you don't have to pay a single penny to get access to all of these awesome tools. Click my link in the description or pinned comment to download Valorant Tracker today. Huge thank you to Valorant Tracker for sponsoring this video, and with all of that being said, guys, let's jump right into the video. There are a lot of settings, so I'm just going to be going through the settings menu in order and telling you guys what to change for each setting. Starting off with the General tab, at the top of the list we have text language, which I have set to English. This is pretty self-explanatory. I'd recommend just using your native language, but you could always switch it up if you want to hear different language voice lines. For the enemy highlight color, I use yellow Deuteronope. I personally think yellow is the easiest color to see and react to. I've tried using red and purple in the past, but I just think yellow is the best. This setting is pretty personal preference, and I'd recommend using what you like, but for me, it's going to be yellow. Next up, we have your mouse settings. For my sensitivity, I am using 0.33 on 800 DPI. This is the sense that I've always used and I really like it. It's a medium-low sense, and I would recommend that you stick to a lower sense for Valorant because most of aiming in Valorant is going to be micro-adjusting and not flicking or tracking. Again, sensitivity is pretty personal preference, but I'd be careful to make sure your sense isn't too high because I see that problem with a lot of players. I have my scoped and ADS sensitivity on 1 because I don't want a different sense for when I'm scoped. I have invert mouse off, but I do have raw input buffer on. If you guys don't know what raw input buffer does, basically it takes your mouse movements directly from your mouse and bypasses any Windows enhancements or alterations such as mouse acceleration. I'd highly recommend turning this setting on, and maybe it is placebo, but for me it felt like my mouse movements were a lot more responsive with this on. Next up, we have your map settings. You can have your map settings whatever you like, but if there's one setting that you have to switch, it's to make sure that you have keep player centered off. If you don't turn off this setting, you won't even be able to see your entire minimap, which is really bad for cross-map awareness, and I would highly recommend making sure that this setting is turned off. You can copy my map settings if you like, but I personally haven't really messed with it too much. Next up, we have the privacy section. I have hide my name on and everything else off. I personally prefer to remain anonymous, but again, this is just a personal thing and you can do whatever you want with these settings. And next up in the other section, there are a lot of options here. I have my first person handedness on right hand, it's just the default and I like it better. I have show corpses and show blood turned off. I do this for visibility, for example, if there's a body in the way that can obstruct your vision, and also when you headshot someone with blood turned off, the sparks are really big and noticeable, so it's easier to tell if you dink someone. I have instability indicators on. This basically just gives you a notification to let you know if you're lagging or if your frames are dropping, and that's just information that I like to know. I would highly recommend you guys to make sure that you have your network buffering on minimum. If you have this set to moderate or maximum, it can really cause you to lag. I have bullet tracers and spectator count both on, and everything else on the list I have turned off, which I'm pretty sure is just a default. I think we're pretty much done here, so let's move on to the controls tab. My controls are mostly just the default controls, but I have a couple things that I changed. I have toggle zoom level on my middle mouse button. Toggle zoom level is basically when you zoom in or out with an operator scope, and I like having this on my middle mouse button because I think it's a really convenient place to have it. This has really helped me out and I like this a lot, so you guys can use it too if you like. I have my team push to talk key on my mouse button, and I have my party push to talk key on caps lock. I think these are just two really convenient keys that I don't use for anything else, so I was like, why not just use it for my comms? I also have auto equip prioritizes on strongest. This basically makes it so that you automatically pull out your strongest weapon after using a piece of utility, picking up an orb, or planting the bomb to make sure that you don't accidentally have your knife out. I would personally recommend changing this setting to strongest. And literally everything else in the controls are just default. I think Riot did a really good job with their controls and most of them feel really intuitive. Now that we've seen that, let's move on to the Crosshairs tab. Crosshairs are extremely personal preference, and I pretty much change my crosshair on a weekly basis, but this is what I've been using right now. Right now, I've been really liking the white dot on size 2 with outlines on. This is a very common crosshair, but it's so clean and simple. For my sniper scope, I have the opacity on 1, the thickness on 1, and I'm using green. I think this sniper scope looks really nice and it's super easy to see the dot, and it's really been working out well for me. Some other crosshairs I use frequently is 1420, 1422, and recently 1323. Like I just mentioned, crosshairs are personal preference, and I'd recommend using one that you can see easily and that you really like, but you can feel free to use any of mine if you'd like as well. I think we're done here, so let's move on to the video tab. This is where the juicy settings are. Under the general section, I have my display mode on full screen. I would highly encourage that you use full screen if you're using windowed or windowed full screen, because it's just so much better for input latency and performance. I have my resolution on 1920 by 1080, which is my native resolution. I've tried stretch res before in the past, and I actually used to main stretch res back in episode 1 or 2, but I switched off of it because I didn't really like it that much. I have my refresh rate on 280 Hz. As far as FPS goes, I have my FPS uncapped. I've never had any issues with leaving my FPS uncapped, but if you do want to cap your FPS, make sure that it's higher than your monitor's refresh rate. For example, if you're playing on 144 Hz, make sure you're getting at least 144 frames. If you're on 240, you want 240, etc, etc. And at the very bottom of this page, I have NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency set to on plus boost. This setting helps with input lag and input delay and making sure that your game is performing well, so I just recommend keeping this setting on plus boost. Let's move on to the next section, which is the graphics quality section. If you have this setting at the top, multi-threaded rendering, I would highly recommend you guys turn this on. This basically allows the game to use more threads in your CPU and just make your game overall perform better, and this is a really good setting to have on. Some of you out there with less threads in your CPU won't have this setting, but if you do have it, I would turn it on. As far as everything else goes, I have all of my graphics on the lowest possible except for 3 of them. I have anti-aliasing on MSAA 4x, I have anistrophic filtering on 8x, and I have beta experimental sharpening on. I found that if you're running all low settings and have everything as low as possible, the enemies and objects look really pixelated and choppy and almost hurt my eyes to look at. Changing these 3 settings fix that issue and make the game have this smooth look to it while gaining all of the benefits by having all low settings. Next up, let's move on to the stats section. I have my FPS on text only, my network RTT, which is my ping, on graph only, and my packet loss on text only. These are just numbers that I like to know. I need to know if I'm lagging, if my frames are dropping, if I'm getting packet loss, stuff like that. I just like to know. If you guys also experience frame drops or ping spikes or anything like that, I'd recommend you guys turn these on as well so you can keep track of it. I think that pretty much covers everything in this tab, so let's move on to the audio tab. In the sound section of the audio tab, I have all of the music in the game off. Usually I'm just listening to my own music anyways, and I don't really care for the music, so I just have it turned off. Make sure that you have your speaker configuration on stereo and not mono. If you have it set to mono, you'll have a really hard time hearing 3D audio and pinpointing where a sound is coming from. I also have HRTF turned on, which is a setting that helps boost directional audio. This setting is supposed to help you hear where the sound is coming from, and it really has helped me a lot, so I just use it. Some people say they really like it, some people say they really hate it, so I'd recommend trying it and see what you think, but for me personally, I enjoy this setting. Next up, we have the voice chat section. Make sure that you have the correct input and output device so you can hear and give comms in game. Everything else in this section is default. I haven't messed around with this at all, so I just recommend keeping this. And finally, in the voiceover section, I honestly don't have any idea what these do. I believe it's agent dialogue in the pre-round, announcer callouts, and just different specific audio sources that you can disable if you like. I only have the last one turned off, which apparently lowers agent voice line audio when someone is talking in game. That setting might be default, I'm not entirely sure, but I personally haven't messed around with any of this, and it looks like it's personal preference. And I think that pretty much covers all of my settings. My settings haven't really changed too much as of recent, but I just wanted to get this video out here for those of you who are looking for some good settings to run on Valorant. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if I had to start on a fresh account, these are definitely the settings that I would use. If you guys have any questions or concerns, feel free to drop them down in the comment section below so I can reply to you. Anyways guys, if you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, don't forget to drop a like down below and also subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Thank you guys so much for all of the support on the channel recently. We are getting insanely close to 170,000 subscribers, which is insane. You guys are the best. Thank you guys so much. I have a Discord link down in the description below. You should come join up on that. We have a super chill community. We'd love to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day or night to watch this video, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.